This week in IT, I look at Microsoft's recently published best practice security advice following the CrowdStrike incident and how managed detection and response solutions fit into it. So stay tuned to find out more. Welcome to This Week in IT, the show where I talk about everything connected to Microsoft 365, Windows, and Azure. But before I get started today, I've got a quick favor to ask you. About 75% of the people who watched last week's video weren't subscribed to the channel. Now, as we go live today, we're on about 7,150 subscribers, and I'd love it if you could help us push that up to 7,200 this week. So if you'd like to see these weekly news updates and analysis from Petri.com, then please subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the bell notification to make sure you don't miss out on the latest uploads. As organizations are still counting the cost of the CrowdStrike incident from a couple of weeks ago, Microsoft has published some best practice security advice about how you might prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future, or at the very least recover from it more easily. So I'm going to go through the advice that they've published, but I want to focus on today's video the subject of deployment rings or stage rollouts and how the various different managed detection and response solutions, or at least the most popular ones, kind of work with that and fit into what Microsoft is describing. So let's look at the advice that was given. So basically there are 6 main points that Microsoft covers. So business continuity planning is the first one. So have you planned for this kind of incident and how you respond to it when it happens? Backup securely and often. So of course you need to make sure that you're backing up your vital data, and that's very timely because Microsoft 365 backup has just gone into general availability this week, so great for Microsoft. The next question is, can you restore? So Microsoft found that during this incident, companies that were actively employing system restore points on Windows were able to get up and running much faster than those that weren't. Deployment rings. So Microsoft is highlighting the fact that Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, that you can essentially deploy the 3 different kinds of updates that it pushes out. So platform updates, engine updates, and the security intelligent updates that can be daily or even more frequently than daily, that you can deploy them in staggered rollouts to make sure that they don't cause any problems. And finally, Microsoft is suggesting that you take a cloud native approach to management. Now, of course, you could argue, well, of course, that's in Microsoft's favor. They want you to be signing up to things like Microsoft Intune and all the various suites and solutions they have, because that's, obviously something that's going to generate income from them. But they do also have a point that if you're managing from the cloud, then it's much easier to deal with those devices that are remote and not either in your data center or devices that are on premises. So much like Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, CrowdStrike has 3 components that it essentially updates on endpoints connected to its Falcon security sensor. So it has the sensor itself, something that it calls sensor content, and then rapid response content. Now, it was this rapid response content that was updated and caused this issue for, essentially Windows devices to blue screen. So the rapid response content kind of plugs into the sensor, if you like, which runs in kernel mode and provides information that allows the sensor to respond to the absolute latest threats to make sure the endpoint is protected. Now, CrowdStrike argues that that is absolutely essential for protecting devices and that it has to roll out those rapid response content updates as quickly as possible to make sure that you're protected in time. Now, as far as I can understand, and CrowdStrike doesn't publish documentation publicly, at least for its solutions, is that the sensor and the sensor content updates itself, that you can essentially deploy these updates in rings. So what Microsoft is saying is, well, whenever there's any kind of update, regardless of what it's to, if there's some risk that it could affect the reliability and stability of an endpoint, that you should consider a staggered rollout. So what they mean is that you deploy the update to a small subset of your devices where they're less likely to, if you do get some serious problem, have a major impact, and then you gradually increase the rollout in rings, and just check that in each stage and each successive ring that there are no major problems before you roll it out further. CrowdStrike deploys its sensor and the sensor content in a way that the organization can create its own deployment rings and do its own internal testing. The problem came with the rapid response content, where there was limited testing from CrowdStrike's point of view and no ability for the organization itself to do its own internal testing before that gets rolled out. Now, of course, there are advantages and disadvantages to that. CrowdStrike saying, well, the reason we do it that way is to get it out as quickly as possible. We don't want you having to do your own internal testing, but of course that brings some risks with it. So what is CrowdStrike doing about all of this? So they've said that they're going to improve their internal testing on these rapid response contents updates by implementing rollback testing, stress testing, fuzzing, fault injection, stability testing, and content interface testing before it gets to you. They've also said that they're going to implement staggered rollouts of content updates. Now, whether that means they're going to test this themselves in deployment rings as they push it out to customers, or whether they're going to allow you to have that control, I'm not quite sure. They don't seem to be saying that very clearly at this stage. I think it's always good to give the customer an option to do their own internal testing using deployment rings if possible. Now, whether it's SentinelOne or CrowdStrike or Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, they all use their own terminology for these kind of, what I would have really called like a signature update. They used to be called back in the day when we were just dealing with simpler antivirus solutions on endpoints. For instance, SentinelOne, I think, calls them live security updates, and they've been saying that they run their live security updates in user mode to reduce the risk to the endpoints. So, that's also something that you can consider. But all of these different solutions, they all do things in a slightly different way, basically lowering or increasing the risk to the stability of the endpoint when that update does finally get to it. So it's worth looking at how they all work before you deploy them and trying to establish the risk to you as an organization, and of course the risk to not deploying this kind of solution. So where does this leave you as an IT pro and as an organization? Well, going forwards, what I would advise is maybe to look at your endpoints and decide which of them are most at risk and which of them need to have a rapid response content update or a security intelligent update, that thing that comes daily or maybe hourly in some cases. Which of your devices actually need to receive those straight away? Which are most at risk? And can you segregate your devices, segment them, to lower the risk that those updates could cause a problem? So that's something you could consider, but of course that depends on whether the solution that you choose to use allows you to do your own internal staggered rollout using deployment rings or not. But if there's a possibility to use internal deployment rings at least on some of your devices, what you have to consider is that no matter how much external testing is done, and even if the external rollout is also staggered, it still doesn't mean that it won't affect you somehow. So if you can deploy an internal staggered rollout on at least a subset of your devices, I think that's something worth considering. And if you do decide to do some some staggered rollout using internal rings, if it's even possible, then you should consider on those devices and on all of your devices really making sure that you follow other security best practices, and you don't need to 100% rely on an MDR solution. So things like, are you updating the OS? Are you patching your applications in a timely way? Are you deploying the principle of least privilege on those devices? Have you thought about application whitelisting? All sorts of things that can bring other benefits. Let me know in the comments below, is your organization having a rethink about how much it trusts third-party MDR solutions? Or if you are using CrowdStrike, are you happy with the changes that they're making to their processes and to their product, or do you think this doesn't go far enough? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you found this video useful, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up, because it helps us to get the video seen by more people on YouTube. If you'd like to see my original CrowdStrike post-mortem, then I'm going to put that onto the screen for you now. Do check that out. But that's it from me for this week, and I'll see you next time.